Good morning. Today is 24 May, the year 2008. I'm Dr. Dave Thompson, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our country's military conflicts, especially World War II. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in those conflicts. Today, I'm here at the museum along with fellow volunteer Jeff Gibbon and special guests Craig and Karen Rawls. And today we have the honor and the privilege of interviewing Lieutenant Robert Pitman. Lieutenant Pitman was a Navy PV-2 pilot in the Atlantic during World War II. Bob was born in Madera, California, and his father's ancestors were among the original settlers of Jamestown, Virginia. His grandfather migrated to Tennessee, but didn't like slavery, and so eventually went to Illinois.
And from Illinois, they moved out to California about I think it was about 1882.
Okay. When you were in Madera, did you live in the same house the whole time you were there, or did you move around some?
Two houses. I was born in one, in what they call the large house in Madera.
Do you remember that address?
6th and C Street. And yeah, I think that's correct. It's C or B, one or the other.
Okay. And then how old were you when you moved to the second house?
2.5.
Okay. Do you remember that address?
Yeah, it was a ranch.
Okay.
Avenue 9. And my father was a farmer.
What do you grow?
We had wheat and barley,
Okay.
and which was a common crop for that era. And well, he farmed, according to my brother, he farmed 30,000 acres.
30,000 acres. Wow.
And well, it's easy to do fairly easy to do when you're dry farming.
Mm-hmm. Did you work on the farm a lot growing up?
You better know it. I was always interested in what my brothers were doing, and so I had them teach me how to milk a cow when I was about 5, 6 years old. And you know who got the job of milking cows for the rest of this day. But yes, I did a lot of the work there. And as I grew up, I worked in the field, harvesting.
Well, you mentioned your brothers. What were their names, and how many did you have, brothers and sisters?
I had 4 brothers, no sisters. And the oldest was Edgar, and he was a master sergeant in the Army. Donald was next, and he was drafted. He waited until they drafted him because he had a family. And he went to Guam as an aviation pilot. I'm sorry, aviation mechanic, because he was very, very mechanical.
Okay. So you lived on the farm all the way through high school?
All the way till the war came on,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Well, for a couple of years there, I had 2 brothers in the University of Berkeley, or the University of California, and can you take these gaps out of it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Correct my whatever it is. But no, Reinhard and Willard were the next two brothers were in Berkeley, the University of California, Berkeley and Davis.
Okay.
And I was at home because when I graduated from high school, my mother said, we don't have enough money to put three men in universities, in college. And so I worked, and I still milk cows.
There you go.
So I worked in the harvest field, and we had a 24-foot cut harvest header on our harvester, and I've got pictures of it.
Okay.
But
do you remember the schools you attended?
you better know it. My mother was my teacher in the first 8 grades, and it was a little one-room school out on the plains, and it's about a half mile from home.
How many kids were in the school?
It varied. That was during the Great Depression, and people were moving around a lot, so try to get themselves settled. But we had at one time we had 9, and another time we had, I think it was 28. And
that must have been a big load on your mom trying to teach all those kids.
she taught, and she gave us as much as 20 minutes and as little as 5.
Now, was she harder on you than the rest of the students, or
No,
did you sweet talk your way into some things?
I didn't sweet talk you didn't sweet talk Alice Pitman. So, no, she was, she was a wonderful teacher.
Okay, where'd you go to high school then?
At Madera Union High School.
Okay, and how big of a school was that? Do you remember?
At that time, I think there was about 300 or so.
Okay. Did you have to take a bus into school?
Yes, an old 1924 white bus with the drop-down window shades, and so we had we kids had a lot of fun on that school. Mr. Jones was the driver, and he wasn't very large stature, and we were a bunch of big old country boys.
Well, you mentioned the Depression earlier. Did your family suffer hard through the Depression, or how do you think your family fared?
We left our home in town and moved back out to the ranch.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what second. I know that the Depression was working hard on us, and Mother's wages from teaching school was the one thing we had to depend on. So but we worked our way through it. And I think one of the bankers had told my father that they didn't know what to do with the land, and that they would prefer that the farmers stay on the land, and they would finance them until they got the debt paid off and went on. So, and that's about what happened.
Were your parents pretty religious at that time, or were you raised in the church?
My mother was. My father was, he was of a large family, and he lost his father when he was 13, and he became the breadwinner of the family, and that's another story.
Do you remember the churches you attended with your mother?
Yeah, Webster School became a church on Sunday, and my uncle, senior of the family, he gave us sermons. Some of them were pretty long, but then sermons were in those days.
Mm-hmm. When you were in high school, did you play any sports?
Yes, I ran track because I went back and forth to school in a bus, and I couldn't get involved because it was 16 miles from the ranch to home, and you can't make that in 20 minutes. An old 1929 Ford, which I wasn't allowed to have very often.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a lot of friends in high school?
Not many.
Not
Some.
many.
There was about 6 of us that were all farm boys that kind of hung together.
Uh-huh.
And on Sneak Day, we raced what they're supposed to do in Sneak Day. The truant officers chased us for about 3 hours, but he never caught us. But yeah, we had our share of fun.
Okay. Do you remember when you first got an interest in aviation?
Yes. Lindbergh
Okay.
was the first, and I read when he completed that flight, and then he wrote his books, and I read quite a few of them. And he interested me in flying, and that's the reason I joined the Naval Air Force when the time came.
Do you remember your first plane ride?
You better know it.
Where was that at?
Because that was in the Living Engine Base in Alameda, excuse me.
Mm-hmm. So that was at a Navy base then. So you didn't get to fly until you got into the military.
I had a sort of a situation when, because I was working on the ranch. My 2 brothers were in college, and Eddie had already volunteered, and Donald was exempted because of the family and his work. He was working for PG&E at the time, and for some reason, the chairman of the draft board picked on the Pitman family. I don't know why. And he said, well, I can't get any one of the older brothers, but I'm sure going to get Bob. And that word came to me from a friend. And I said, you can tell him that he won't ever I'll never sign a draft. And he said, I'll put you in jail. So that was the competition we had there. So when I was the last year I was at Davis, I went in April, I went down to Alameda, passed all the physicals and all the tests, signed into the Navy, and asked for a 90-day deferment to as long as they could, which was August 1st. Because my father we had shipped him back to Mayo's Clinic because he had cancer. And that got pretty, I said, I would like to stay home until I see my father home. And so, I don't know, what was your question?
How old were you when you went into the Navy?
I was 21, my birthday being May 1st.
Okay, so you graduated high school at what year?
1937.
Okay. So what'd you do once you got out of high school?
Back to the ranch.
Back to the ranch. So you were working on the ranch.
Yes.
Where were you on December 7th, 1941?
I was returning to the base from a 24-hour liberty. I was in training. I went in November, late in November, into the training, the formal training course
In 1941.
in 1941.
Okay.
And I was off on play at that time, and I didn't hear about it until they got back aboard the base.
Oh, mercy.
And we found out about it Monday morning. One course was cut from a 1 week course to 3 hours. The nomenclature course was cut to 1 day.
Well, let's go back then and start where you started your military training. So you got inducted into the Navy at what month?
In August.
Okay, and then you...
41.
Okay. And then where was your first base?
I'm sorry, it was 40 because I was 20. Now I'm getting confused.
Doesn't matter. Where was your first training base?
My first training base was Alameda Naval Elimination Reserve Base.
Okay.
I think that's the proper title.
Tell us a little bit about the training there.
Well, the elimination base, they took candidates for the Air Force and made them prove up. We had to solo within 12 hours, or we would be shipped over back to boot camp and sent on in the regular Navy.
So you were training on Stearmans or Ryan's?
Stearmans.
Okay.
And, no, Stearmans came later, Corpus Christi. Those were N3Ns, which was a Navy built, you could almost get out and walk away from them at 500 feet and come back 20 minutes later and catch them in the next block. They were very slow.
Okay.
But they were stable.
So apparently you passed your first 12 hours.
Yes.
So how long did it take you to solo?
Huh?
How long did it take you to solo?
Took me about 13 hours, 13, 14 hours. And it was at the trainer's discretion whether he kept them until 15 hours or not. But there was one boy there who couldn't get over freezing on the stick, and he got knocked out a couple of 3 times with a fire extinguisher to get him off the stick. And of course there were 2 places, and then there was pull the extinguisher off and knocked him out.
So you were at this base, what, about 6 weeks in training?
About about 6, 8 weeks.
And they taught you the rudiments of flying.
And they also taught us the rudiments of formation marching too.
And how to make your bunk right.
No, they didn't bother us with that. That came later at Corpus Christi. The petty officer flipped the quarter on, and if it didn't bounce, you had to make it over again. And that happened to me once.
So you were sent then to Corpus Christi after Alameda.
Yes.
And how long were you in Corpus Christi?
Oh, we got down there. Well, I went in. I entered the training in November of 1941, just before December 7th.
Okay.
And I was in ground school on November or December 7th.
Okay. And so that's in Corpus is where they start teaching a little more advanced flying?
Yes.
And you were flying the Stearman?
Yeah, we flew the Stearman and the N3N. They had them both on the line.
Okay.
And that was interesting flying. Those planes were around that base like bees around a hive. And if you were in a swivel head, you got taken out. But they were the approaches to circle. It was come in on the traffic pattern, and you do an S turn into a 100-foot circle, and you had to hit it.
Uh-huh. So you were there, and is it that point there that they started looking at you whether you were going to be a fighter pilot or a PV pilot?
I think that was ongoing.
It was ongoing?
I don't really know that it started there, but I'm sure you were under observation.
Did they start asking you questions, kind of see what kind of things you'd want to do?
I always asked for fighter duty.
Okay.
And I never got it.
So you were finishing up in this training class, and where'd you go next?
Well, your flight training was in 3 sections. One, you learned to fly. And during that time, I had 1 emergency landing, which we survived it. We had the King Ranch, which was the area we flew over, and you had plenty of room to land.
Mm-hmm.
And we had that emergency landing. No radios, though. So they flew a couple of guys out there, and we got it taken care of. He said, well, you've landed it, you take it off.
So did your engine just quit or something?
No, the oil pressure dropped. And, I mean, it was up, and then all of a sudden, and so
You dead stick her in, huh?
When the seamen or the non-coms have told us, and a pilot and the teachers all said, when you lose you land, don't tear up the plane. So I did.
There you go.
And I got a little bit of flack about it, but then I did what they told me.
So they start teaching navigation at this point, or was that later on?
Oh, navigation came much later on. That came in the senior part of the training.
Okay.
So yeah, we went in the elementary aviation. They taught us to fly, and then they taught us the unusual positions to build our confidence and build the confidence in the aircraft. And while that was going on, my instructor, he loved to do what we call the falling leaf. Now, I don't know whether you know what the falling leaf is or not. No, stall.
Okay.
And reversing with the steerman or the N3, you reversed your rudder and you'd go the other way. You would kick the left rudder and you'd do, and so we both loved to do that. And one occasion, he had told me to do it, and he was the watchdog. And he said, by the way, what is our altitude? And I said, 500 feet. He said, oh my God. Both of us had forgotten. But that was an interesting experience. I didn't have anything unusual in that, except for that emergency landing.
So where was your next training base?
I trained entirely at Corpus Christi.
At Corpus Christi, okay. So then you moved into the advanced phases of training?
I went into the intermediary,
okay,
in which you were taught formation flying, a little bit of instruments, and more precise, I guess I should say.
Did you move into S&Js at that time?
We moved into SNVs with a fixed landing gear.
Okay.
And I've never seen one since.
Huh.
But that was formation flying and a little bit of instruments. And then we went on to advanced training.
Okay.
And they put me in OS2U3s, and I was not happy with it. But what could I do? And we were on OS2U3s on a pontoon.
Yeah, those were the planes that they normally carried on battleships and shot off
Right.
the decks, right?
Yeah, and that was they were the pilots. And the story is told if they went out and came back they got a royal treatment. They came back and survived the duty on the second trip. Nobody said anything. If they survived the third one, they court-martialed him because he wasn't doing his duty. Because you're flying right over the target line, and you're 200, 300, 400, 500 feet, and OS2U3 flew about 70 knots. We used to patrol it at 70, 75 knots.
So I bet being shot off that rail was quite an experience.
Being shot off of a 60-foot rail with a 3-inch shell, that's what our propulsion was.
Put you in the back, push you into the seat real quick.
You locked your navigation board in, and you made sure it was locked in. Otherwise, you got it right here, and right in the stomach.
And so how long were you in that plane?
Too long. But no, I graduated from Pensacola in that plane, and I was assigned to a squadron of them in the Atlantic Fleet. And after about 3 weeks of leave and travel time, and I don't think they knew what to do with us when we reported in, because the first place they sent me to Cherry Hill, which was Cherry Point. Excuse me, 80 years of memory is pretty tough. But they sent me to Cherry Point, which was a Marine base. That commander looked at me when I walked in, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And "These are my orders." And that's what they read. So he kept me for a couple of weeks and sent me back to Norfolk. And I was assigned to, I don't remember these squadron numbers now. But I was there. We were still more or less training. And Commander Johnson, and Mrs. Johnson, she mothered the whole squadron. In those days, they were a little bit more, what am I trying to say, more family-like.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did formation flying. We did, and we invented a game. We didn't invent it. We came up with a game with line formation, and then we'd move together and wiggle your wings. And the guy that broke the wing light had to buy, and the object was to crack them. We did pretty well with it. I wouldn't do that now. So all the teams trying to.
I bet the commanders weren't very happy when you come back with busted lights.
No, the chiefs never told anybody. They just fixed them.
So how long were you flying the OS-2 and the OS-3?
Well, I was flying the OS-3 for about 6-7 months.
Okay.
And that was a plane that we flew. We were flying when they came to us and they said, "You're going to go on patrol duty from Cape May to Hatteras. And we're going to give you 2 depth charges, and they're submarines. Go out and kill them."
So they moved you into the PV-1 then?
No, they didn't do it. That came later. They realized after a few months, they realized that the plane wasn't fast enough, because we would arrive at Hatteras in the early morning flight. We get there just after dawn, and we've seen as many as 6 slicks where the submarines dived. When they heard our plane coming, they dived, and we couldn't possibly get there and find. So they had to do something, and they brought in the PV-1, and we got trained in that one.
And how long of a transition did it take you to go through, training-wise?
Oh, I would guess a year, because we were doing training and also patrolling.
So it was kind of like on-the-job training.
On-the-job training.
So tell me about the PV-1.
What do you want to know about her?
Well,
She was excuse me, Karen, she was a bitch. When she wanted to, she could fly like an angel. When she had something wrong with her, you didn't fool around with her, because later on, when we were going to Africa, we got out about 20 minutes past the point of no return, and we lost an engine. And we were overloaded, as the Navy always did. I don't put that in, please. But we were at wave top for 4 hours, and on Ascension Island, the west end of the runway is 150 feet above sea level.
so you had to lighten up before you could even raise up to get on the
We
lane?
didn't dump anything. We went the east end was at 50 feet. And I said, "Skippy," I said, "let's try for 100 feet." And we couldn't even get 100 feet. We tried for about 10 minutes trying to get that thing up and maintained, because we were flying right on spin out. She spun out at about, supposed to have been spun out about 92 knots. We were down in the 80s at times. And we had been overloaded because we were moving the squadron, and every plane got loaded and overloaded, and we had 2 wing tanks of, I think there were 180 gallons. And we had a Bombay tank, which was about 200 and some odd pounds. We were heavy.
So how many were in your crew?
Beg pardon?
How many were in your crew?
15.
On the plane?
No, 5 was a crew. Oh, I'm sorry. The crew was 5.
Okay.
Pilot, co-pilot, engineer, ordnance man, and just general housekeeper.
Okay.
But
Were you pilot or co-pilot?
I was co-pilot on that flight at that time because Tommy Moore had which was my CO. He had a thing about training, and he came up with the idea that we would sit in the pilot seat and blindfolded, and put your hand on whatever they mentioned. Some of them were switches on the switch panel, and you just you had to touch that toggle switch. You couldn't touch anything else. And I think one of the reasons why our squadron got through was I don't know. I've never looked it up. I think we've probably had the lost planes. We lost 1, 2, 3. With 3 planes, and one of them was two of them. One of them was fatal. He tried to take out an orange tree in Florida, and it didn't work.
Mm-mm. So what armament did these planes carry? Armament?
We had, at that time, before we were trained in rocketry, we had 2 fixed guns in the nose, 50 calibers, 2 50 calibers in the turret, a pair of 30 calibers Stingers in the back observation point and under the tail, and 6 depth charges.
Carried internally or on outside?
We carried them internally. We had on the posts, the wing post, you could carry. Well, we did get it to the point where we could put 3 on each, a pod of 3 on each wing. Okay. And wire it into the pickle.
Did you carry any radar at all?
Yes. We have. This is an early point of radar development, because those submarines were just tearing us up.
Mm-hmm. So you could pick up like the conning tower if they were surfaced.
Well, we could pick up. I think we could have picked up a periscope. I know we could pick up a snorkel when they started with that.
Okay.
But yes, we could pick up a conning tower very, very easily, about 10 to 15 miles.
Okay. Now, who ran the radar?
We had the radar man.
Okay.
Radio man, and the third man that I'm talking about was a radar man.
Okay.
My memory is not serving me properly.
So these would be long patrols, wouldn't they?
Well, my logbook shows 4 and 5 hours, 3 to 5 hours, and yeah, they were fairly long for that aircraft.
So you go out off the coast of New Jersey and patrol.
We were off New Jersey in patrol. We were moved to Sanford, Florida, to be trained in the PV-2, and that's where I finally began to learn it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so did you ever go overseas?
Yes, we went up to, we were in Port Wwii for about, until we finished our 55 patrols.
Okay.
And then sent home, which was about 10 or 11 months.
Okay. So it took you 10 or 11 months to complete 55 patrols?
Yes. some weeks we flew every day. That the pattern that they had for us to fly was, we called it the nose bag, which, if you remember the characteristics of the continent there, you came around a hump of Africa and it went into straits and then back up the south coast of Spain, not quite up to Portland or Portugal, but and we had 3 planes generally on that, and we were to cover that water every 20 minutes, 24 hours a day. And we were no consideration for weather.
So let's take a scenario that your radio man pops up and says, I got a sighting at such and such direction. So what would be the plan of attack that you would go for?
Start chasing.
Start chasing.
We would follow the radar. He would be guiding us until we made visual contact.
So let's say he picked up a conning tower 15 miles out. What altitude would you be at that point?
The altitude was assigned for that type of approach shot was about 1,500, 2,000 feet, which was, I don't know, my own opinion, but then those tacticians had more to do with that than we did. We flew what they told us.
Okay.
And but you could see, you could pick up on a radar, you could pick up a periscope at about 10 miles, depending upon the weather.
Okay. And so you would race to it as fast as you could. One submarine sunk for every 2,800 hours of flying time. Yes, we didn't waste any time. And how would you approach the attack? I mean, would you drop your depth charges if you knew it just gone down, or how would
it proved out that you had 45 seconds that you could drop with any kind of results.
Okay.
After 45, after the feather disappeared, you got 45 seconds to, you could either drop straight ahead or left or right after that, because you're guessing.
Would you drop just one or multiples?
Well, if you was underwater, you drop multiples. Well, it depends upon the attack. If the conning tower is above surface, you can plan your attack a little bit. You have a few seconds. You might slide over to make a quartering a drop or what. But after 45, 60 seconds, there was no sense in dropping.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on one of those things. But this was another wild story. But I was been grounded by the flight surgeon because I had a very bad cold. So when we were grounded, you got the duty 24 hours a day. And everybody else was out on doing something. And the flight officer and I were the only ones available when somebody saw a submarine out on the Florida Straits steaming along on the surface. Well, the order was that there was a co-pilot the pilot and the co-pilot and a full crew before you went out to make an attack. Well, this gentleman, he didn't have a co-pilot, and so he came into me and he said, but I said, I'm grounded. Flight surgeon. Oh, well, come on, we're not going to go that high. And so we argued a bit, but I was giving in, and so he said, I won't be above 2,000, 2,500 feet. Well, that's fine. If we could fly with, I figured we could fly with that. He went up to 12,000 feet and dive bombed him. Well, it blew my ears completely out.
Oh, mercy.
I was 95% deaf for several months. But it took surgery and they corrected it.
I bet he lost a rank or two for taking you out like that, didn't he?
No, I was the one that, the flight surgeon said, I'm going to court-martial you. Because it was a court-martial defense. I was directly against written orders. But we talked him out of it. At the Oak Club.
So you were telling me a story of a possible kill. Can you expand on that?
Well, that was a total miss because I had to stop watch, and he was 65 seconds under. That was within the periscope. As these kids have heard me say, patrolling is a boring business, and but we were going, well, I don't know, I guess for the second trip around, and about mid-afternoon, and all of a sudden I saw a stick in the water, and there was a feather from it, but as I went over it later, it was a tactical. It was a tactical periscope, and he was looking for something because he was barely making way because he didn't have a high feather, but feathers are unusual in that they if they're going across the wind or into the wind, they will make a feather that you can see. I mean, you can pick it up when you see it. And we spotted this thing, and I alerted the boys, and we armed it, and I made an approach, and I dove in on it, and it was a quartering. My path was, so I got number 3 bomb on the port side, and number 4 bomb on the starboard side off the bow. But I know we sank that submarine, and I think I had confirmation later on. And about a couple of years ago, I saw a documentary based on the German submarine logs, and they had accounted for all but one submarine, and it was off Tangier where I thought I sunk this one. So who knows? It would be fun to go out to search for it if we could find some debris, but I know I got a submarine.
There you go.
I don't care what anybody else thinks.
There you go. So you finished up your tour of duty, and you were coming back to the United States.
Oh, I came back. Yes, I came back. We got our leave.
Did you fly home, or did you come home on ship?
Oh no, I flew home. We flew home commercial. but we flew with civilians.
And what date was this?
Oh, you would ask me that. I don't remember dates that well.
Well, what about time of year? What year?
Well, it was in about September.
Okay, of what year?
October, and that would have been in 44.
Okay.
And then I was reassigned to night fighter instructions, and we flew a target, a small, I can't remember that utility plane. The Army used it for bomber training. Twin engine?
C-47?
No, wasn't that big. Small. I'm sorry, I made evaded, but anyhow, we used them for target.
Okay.
What time is it? This watch is giving up. It's at 30 years old.
I don't know. Okay, here we go.
I got it. Well, we'll go. I'll get my time.
10:20. Okay. Oh, I'm going to change this tape out here.
Admiral McIntyre was FDR Roosevelt's personal private doctor. He was kept in Washington just to be there in case Roosevelt called. And he was not a happy camper. He wanted to be on a hospital ship. And he had a habit of running away. So we got this radio message that VIP coming your way, and have a plane ready and standing by for him to take off and continue his flight. Because he was running on his admiral stripes, so there's no way he could have been anything else. But he climbed off of that. He went down to Fort Bennett and I think it was Fort Bennett, and he commandeered a plane and flew him across the Atlantic to Port Layuti. And I caught the duty of standing by for him. Well, he jumped off of that plane, and he says, "Where's my?" Obviously, because I was watching. I was in the cockpit, and our engines were running. We were ready to go. And I could see somebody said, "Well," pointing at my plane, and so he ran across the tarmac and climbed in, and he said, "Let's go." And I don't remember the name of that base, and I'm sorry, but anyhow, we started out, and I laid a course across the Atlas Mountains because they were there. We had to get around them, over them or something. And we got right about in the middle of the Atlas Mountains, and all of a sudden we lost one engine. The port engine went dead on us. And the weather was very hot, and we were losing altitude, slowly losing altitude, and I realized we weren't going to, if we got out of the mountains, we'd be lucky. Oh, anyhow, I waited about 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so, and I tried that engine, and it caught. Just the first revolution it caught, and it never gave us any trouble after that. But what amazed us and the crew was that man jumped out of the radar seat, came up, stuck his head in my cockpit, and he said, "Anything I can do?" I said, "No, nothing you can do." He He said, but we are losing altitude. I said, we're going to have a problem. He said, well, if there's nothing I can do, I'll go back and sit down. And he went back and sat in that, and the boy said he was, within 3 minutes, he was asleep. And when we landed at the assigned base, we were surrounded by Marines. I mean, they were up and they had the vehicles on either side of the runway all the way through our rollout. And they were standing right at the door when we opened it, and they said, "Admiral, sir, would you please go with us?" He said, "Oh," and he said, "You caught up with me." But he had a habit of doing that. But I thought that was an interesting thing.
During the break, we also got a picture of your plane here. And could you point out a few of the things about your plane?
Well, two Pratt & Whitney 2400s, 2,000 horsepower, each one, 4,000 horsepower, the droppable wing tank, turret, and you can't see the tail stinger because the wing blanks it out. This is the reason why I never wore a parachute in this plane. That is our escape hatch right above our head. The first thing you hit is this radio antenna tower, and from there you bounce off of a. This was the pilot's escape hatch. You bounce off of the Astrodome, and then if you don't hit that, you probably get caught on the
turret.
The turret. And if you're lucky enough to miss all those, you got this crossbar split tail to get by. So I sort of took a look at that thing, and I said, "The heck with it. I'm not going to be uncomfortable. I'm not going to survive anyhow." So that's the way we went.
Okay, so now we're back. You've come back from overseas. You're now in the United States, and you've been assigned to a training base. What was your duties there?
I was assigned to Quonset Point,
Okay.
Rhode Island. And I particularly chose that site
And why is that?
because there's a lovely lady in Providence who became my wife.
And how did you meet her?
Oh, well, I've been part of the crew that had come up there to pick up a plane. We were supposed to pick it up and go right back down to the land. And the plane wasn't ready. In fact, we waited 3 weeks, and all I had was my light summer uniform, and this was in March. And March in Quonset Point is not a place to be in your summer uniform. So, and I didn't have very much. I only had a few dollars in my pocket. So I hung around the base, and I finally got cabin fever. So they said, well, one of the boys said, well, there's in the hotel there's a what am I trying to say? An entertainment center for officers, not there was an exclusion on crew. So I went up there, and there was a good, very handsome blonde lady, and we started dancing and talking, and it was my wife's sister, and who later got involved in OSS, but that's another story. And I went back. We made an appointment for a date back in the hotel at the ballroom. And during that date, she said, "You know, I'm going to Washington." And she didn't tell me about it, but she went to Washington to get on with General Donovan in OSS. And she had a career in OSS all during she was in Egypt and China, where she met her husband. And I said, "Oh, gee whiz," you know. And she said, I'll tell you what, next time you come in, I'll bring my sister, and maybe you two can enjoy the rest of your stay here, because we could have gone home at any day." And so the meeting was arranged, and we met, and she introduced me to her sister, who was quite charming, and I felt that she was worthy of that. We were only married 60 years, but so we met, and we were going to have a departure party. This was earlier on, before we went overseas. And I said, "Would you like to go?" And I said, "I can't tell you anything about it. I can't tell you where we're going or anything like that." She said, "Well, that's all right." And anyhow, we had a lot of fun that night. And I said, "This party is Wednesday night. Could you come?" She was in college. And she said, "Yes, I'll be there. I can come." And I said, "I'll come get you." And gave it to me. And I'll tell you what, I remember this picture to this day. I'll never forget it. They were in a 2-story home, and of course all the bedrooms are upstairs. And the maid met me at the door, and she said, "You're here to pick up Ruthie?" And I said, "Yes." Ruthie came to the head of that stairs, and it was a picture. She was in a beautiful dress, party dress, and it was in the days of nylons with seams, and it was black, and it was had a I don't know what the waist was at the hip line, and from there down it was pleats. And I'll tell you, to me right now, she's an angel. So, and that led to other things, roses. Oh, we had more fun. I sent her roses from Africa. We had another crew came back for a plane a few months later on, and he said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "You can send a dozen roses to this dress."
So you come back to the States and you request a special training near her, and so you're starting to...
Yeah, that's another story. I knew that fleet personnel, they were all mad because they were land-based, they weren't aboard ship, and they don't know how well off they were. But anyhow, I got a senior lieutenant that was helping me get my new assignment, and I kept telling him, I said, "Man, don't send me to Rhode Island. I don't want to go. I've been there already." And he kept irritating him. He says, "Well, I want to get to the fleet." I says, "You don't know what you're missing in here." And I kept And I bantered him to the point where he was very angry. He sent me to Rhode Island. And
So how long did it take after you got to Rhode Island before you were married?
about 5 months. She was disappointed at Christmas time because I didn't give her the ring. Then I had already pinned her with my wings. And yeah, it was about 6, 7 months.
Okay, so you're at this base. What's the name of the base there?
Port Leote.
Okay, and you're training pilots to do what now?
Which one? The one in the States or
Mm-hmm.
the one in
The one in the States.
One in the States was Quonset Point, Rhode Island.
Okay, and what were you training pilots there?
Well, we were there. We did miscellaneous things for a while, and they finally, after we were married, the SEAL and that department was a compadre of mine and overseas, and he came around and he said, "Hey, Pitman, it's kind of hard working nights. When you're newlywed." I said, "Well, you can live with it." So he transferred me over. On a day or two, I was sent down to Westerly, Rhode Island to train instrument pilots. So I went down there. We messed around. Then they did the paperwork for VP 132, and they sent us down to DeLand, Florida, and that's where we did most of our training. That's where we lost one crew, and that was the beginning of the training in the what's the matter, honey? I forgot your name already. But PV-1.
Okay. So how much longer did you stay in the Navy after you got home and got married?
Until it was over.
Until the war was over, okay.
The war was over, and as soon as it was over, I put in for discharge.
And
I had already put in for a regular Navy, in which they had given me, but nobody had advised me.
Okay, so you get out of the Navy, and then what?
Out of the Navy, back to college. I'd had 2 years I wanted to finish.
And where'd you go?
And I went to Rhode Island University. Fortunately, my wife's family had a very good friend who was on the Board of Regents, and with his pull, I got in.
And what'd you major in?
I majored in business.
Okay.
By this time, the war had followed up my plans, which was to finish in Davis, come out of Davis as a veterinary doctor. So, but that war tore up a lot of people's plans.
Mm-hmm. So you graduated and...
I graduated, and I went to work for an insurance company. Worked for them for about 3 years, and I had met on age of a friend of ours. We became friends as a realtor, and he wanted an insurance company agency, so I left the insurance company and went to work building an insurance agency. Unfortunately, my cohort passed away. He was shoveling snow in November. I'm sorry, February, and had a heart attack.
Right as you're opening the insurance agency?
Well, we've been doing it for about a year or so. but they wanted me to take over the real estate department too, so I did.
So how long did you do
We were
that?
doing well, but then things were happening and the market went to pot, and just kind of like what we've got now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an entirely different story.
So how do you think World War II affected the rest of your life? Do you think it had a major impact on...
Well, there are pluses and minuses. The big plus was my wife,
Mm-hmm.
and we had 3 children,
And what are their names?
Nancy and Gregory and Sarah,
Okay.
which is a family name on both sides of the family. You know, those New Englanders they're very heavy on the lineage, and my grandmother on the maternal side is named Sarah, and Sarah is a name in her family. It shows up several times. So my name is Sarah.
Well, good.
So what else?
Is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
Well, there is one little story that might be interesting to some people and give you an idea as to what aviation is about and how dangerous it can be. I had a student in the reserves that had to be checked out with night landings. So we were flying around, and I was going to put him through a couple of more landings, but then he got too far in the landing pattern, and he was down about 400 feet. He was in a landing stage, wings, the flaps down, the gear down, and the carburetor reached, and I was, all of a sudden I became dissatisfied with what he was doing. I said, hey, John, I said, let me have it. And just as I said have it, the starboard engine quit. And I took in the controls, I feathered the engine, and I brought the flaps up, and I forgot. And that forgetting can be very dangerous. I was 400 feet when those flaps came up, it dropped. We were about 50 feet. And we flew, they were extending the runways in Willow Grove for jets. And I made 2 mistakes. Number 1, the flaps. Number 2 was the landing lights, and I think that saved our lives. Because the landing light picked up a boom on a right, somewhere left up. So, and you don't do fancy work with an aircraft when you're in an emergency. But there was no other way that I could get around that. I couldn't skid it over or one way or the other, and it wouldn't come up. I just rolled it up. We went by it, and I rolled it back. From then on, we started to climb a little bit. And that evening, we were picking up New York, Floyd Bennett, and the tower, my tower, he said, he used my number, and he said, "Are you still flying?" So I picked up the mic and said, "Yeah," and dropped it and went back to work. And somebody up in Floyd Bennett heard what was going on, and he said, "Navy so-and-so, repeat after me." I get emotional about this one. He repeated the entire, "Come on, Pitman, stop it." He repeated the entire Lord's Prayer for us. And when he finished, I was at 1,500 feet back up to flying speed in perfect condition to make a single-engine landing.
Those things you'll never forget.
That's for sure. Well, I've been emotional about this stuff for a long time.
Well, it's good to be emotional about it. Well, on behalf of the Air Museum, I really appreciate you taking the time to come down and visit with us and share your story.
Well, what happens with this now